She was a feared queen left to die by her own people. He was a broken soldier with no reason to care. On a battlefield soaked in blood and betrayal, their worlds collided. What began as survival became something greater, a bond that could reshape a dying galaxy. But trust is fragile, and time is running out. Will they rise from the ashes, or be buried by them? If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. The ground was still warm from fire. Smoke curled into the sky, clinging to the broken bones of trees and twisted metal. A heavy silence hung over the battlefield, broken only by the occasional groan of something still burning. Dust floated in the air, tinted red by the setting sun. The scent of ash, sweat, and blood lingered thickly, as if the land itself remembered every scream and every fall. In the middle of the scorched wasteland, a figure lay motionless. Her armor, once gleaming with gold and blue fire, was now cracked and stained with grime. Her skin, once radiant with light, had dulled to a dim, flickering glow. Her name was Nira. Once they called her the Flame-Bearer, Queen of the Solari, feared and respected across a dozen worlds. But now, she looked like little more than a fallen shadow of her former self. Her limbs were twisted at awkward angles. Cuts ran deep across her body, where strange blue fluid seeped slowly onto the soil. Every breath was a struggle, a knife in her side. Her silver eyes, once sharp and proud, fluttered open with effort. She scanned the ruined landscape, her vision blurring with pain and smoke. There was no one. No allies. No army. All gone. Her warriors had promised loyalty. They had raised their weapons and cried out her name. But when the final assault came, when the enemy overran their last defense, they broke like dry branches. Some fell with honor. Others ran. None stayed. And now, Nira, the Flame-Bearer, lay alone in the dirt. She tried to lift herself, but her body refused. Her muscles trembled, and a wave of agony washed over her. She collapsed again, her forehead pressing into the ash-covered ground. Part of her wanted to give in, to let the earth swallow her. Pride, however, was a stubborn thing. Even now, when everything was lost, she would not cry out. If this was her end, she would face it in silence. A soft crunch echoed nearby, a boot on shattered stone, then another. She froze, straining to listen. Someone was moving through the wreckage, not fast, not hunting, cautious, searching. A figure appeared through the haze, a human man, rough and weathered. He moved with the slow care of someone who had seen too many ambushes. His clothing was torn and his face marked with lines of exhaustion, but his eyes were alert. He saw her. At first, he didn't react. He just stood there staring. Maybe he thought she was dead. Most would. But then he stepped closer. He paused, then took another step, drawn by something even he didn't fully understand. Nira watched him through narrowed eyes. She wanted to speak, to warn him away. She didn't trust him. Couldn't. But her voice caught in her throat, dry and cracked. It took all her strength to raise one hand, barely a twitch. He saw it. His expression shifted, not to fear, but to concern. That surprised her. "You're alive," he murmured. She tried again, forcing the words out past blood and pain. "You are not meant to touch me." Her voice was weak, a whisper carried by the wind, but it held a strange authority even in that moment. The man didn't step back. Instead, he crouched beside her, close enough that she could see the dirt under his nails and the tight set of his jaw. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "You're bleeding. Let me help." Nira wanted to push him away. Her instincts screamed at her to resist, to fight. But there was no strength left in her body, only pride, and even that was beginning to crack under the weight of her wounds. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. This time she did not protest when his hands reached for her arm. He worked quickly, tearing cloth from his own shirt to wrap around her injuries. His hands were steady, practiced, She watched him silently, confused. Why would a human, a stranger, help her? What did he want? Why? She asked, her voice hoarse. He didn't look up. Because you're still breathing. And that means something. Nira said nothing. Her people had left her. This man, with no reason to care, had stayed. As the sky darkened and the cold crept in, he gently lifted her into his arms. She flinched, at first pain tearing through her side, but he adjusted his grip, murmuring soft reassurances. You're not supposed to be alone out here, he said. Nobody is. She didn't answer. But for the first time in days, she closed her eyes not because she wanted to die, but because maybe, just maybe, someone would fight for her when she couldn't. As the man carried her through the ruins, the flames behind them faded into night. Ahead, the unknown waited. And somewhere deep inside her, a spark flickered. Not from the power she had lost, but from something she had never known before. Hope. Rain started falling as the man carried Nira through the ruined hills, each drop washing ash from the air. The storm wasn't fierce, but steady and cold, the kind that seeps into your bones. He said nothing as he walked, only adjusting her weight on his back now and then. She didn't speak either. Her energy was gone, and her pride was slowly being chipped away by the quiet kindness of a stranger. His name, she would later learn, was Kalen, a soldier without an army, a man who had lost his squad in the early days of the war, and had been moving alone ever since, sometimes fighting, sometimes hiding, but always surviving. Now, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he was risking everything to carry a wounded alien queen across a hostile land. They moved slowly through the wreckage of war. Trees snapped like matchsticks, craters filled with rainwater. Pieces of metal still hummed with leftover energy. Every so often, Kalen would stop to rest against a broken wall or the trunk of a fallen tree, making sure Nira was still breathing. Her light, once blinding, now glowed faintly beneath layers of grime. How far are we from anything? She asked weakly once, her voice barely above a whisper. Kalen didn't look back. Far enough to be worried, close enough to keep moving. Her body ached. Every movement sent sharp pain through her ribs, and yet she clung to consciousness. Something about the way he moved, the stubborn determination, made it hard to let go. She had once believed humans were beneath her people, guided by emotion and chaos. But this man, he was steady in a way she wasn't used to. Not calculating, just quietly certain. Night fell fast and the world around them turned dark. That's when the Watchers came. Shadows in the distance, movement between the ruins. Nira saw them first. Shapes that moved too quickly, too silently. She tensed. Kalen noticed. What is it? We're being followed, she said, trying to sit up. He didn't question her. He changed direction instead, ducking under collapsed beams, slipping through narrow gaps in stone. But the figures didn't leave. They stayed just at the edge of sight, close enough to be seen, never close enough to be confronted. When they reached the edge of a valley, a voice called out, not Kalen's language, but hers. Nira stiffened. More figures emerged from the shadows, this time clearly visible. Aliens like her, their skin marked with glowing symbols, their faces lined with suspicion. The leader, an older woman with a long staff and cautious eyes, stepped forward. Nira recognized her. Sci-Fi, one of the last elders of her court. She had assumed the woman was dead. You, Sci-Fi said slowly, her voice heavy with disbelief. Still breathing. We thought you lost. I was left, Nira replied, her words sharper than she intended. And now I've returned. Sci-Fi's eyes flicked to Kalen. With a human? Kalen set Nira down carefully on a dry patch of ground. He didn't speak, didn't raise his hands. He just waited. He saved me, Nira said quietly. There was a silence that lasted too long. The other aliens exchanged uneasy glances. Salai's expression didn't change. We've lost much. Many blame you for it. They won't trust him. Then they'll have to trust me, Nira said, though even as she spoke the words, she knew how fragile her authority had become. Salai sighed and motioned for the group to lower their weapons. Come, shelter's not far. They led Kaelin and Naira to a half-collapsed bunker hidden beneath a hill. Inside, survivors huddled around a faint energy core for warmth. Children watched from behind crates, their eyes wide. Warriors glanced up, hands near their weapons. The room grew quiet as Naira entered, supported by Kaelin. Later, as they rested near a flickering lamp, Kaelin asked, "Do they hate me because I'm human, or because I'm with you?" Naira didn't answer right away. "Both, I think," she finally said. "They've lost faith. In me, in peace, in anything that's not their own." "And what about you?" he asked. "I led them with fear," she admitted. "Now I see what it became." Kaelin stared into the light. "You can't lead people who are afraid of you. That's not loyalty. That's survival." His words echoed in her mind. She had been so sure of her power before, so certain that fear was enough. But now she sat among those who used to kneel before her, and none of them bowed. They only watched, waiting to see who she would become. That night, while others slept, she whispered one question to Kaelin. "Why did you help me?" He looked at her, tired but honest. "Because someone should have." It was a simple answer, and yet it meant more than any oath or battle cry she'd ever heard. Maybe it was the beginning of something she hadn't believed possible. Not trust. Not yet. But something close. And somewhere deep inside, the weight of two worlds began to shift. The morning light was pale and uncertain as it stretched across the battered hills. Inside the hidden bunker, silence hung in the air. Most of the survivors were still asleep, curled up beneath worn blankets or resting against broken walls. Naira sat alone near the cold lamp, her eyes open but distant. She hadn't slept. Her thoughts were too loud. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the battlefield, the faces of those who had followed her, and the moment they had left her behind. She could still feel their fear, their silence, the way they turned away. She had ruled with strength, with control. Her word had been law. But now, here in this crumbling place, there were no crowns, no titles, only questions. And worst of all, no one had come to her for orders. They didn't look to her as their leader anymore. They looked past her, as if she was just another wounded figure in the dark. Kaelin entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of water. He handed one to her, saying nothing. She took it without a word. They had grown used to silence between them. Sometimes it said more than anything else could. Outside, Salai and a few others were gathering supplies, whispering in small groups. Tension crackled in the air. The soldiers were restless. There was talk of a new threat, an enemy base known as the Harrow Fortress, where most attacks were being controlled. If it remained standing, their people would never be safe. In a meeting, later that day, the group sat in a circle around a rough map drawn on the floor with chalk and broken wires. Kaelin crouched beside the map, studying it closely. Naira sat quietly at the edge. Salai stood in the center. "This is where the enemy coordinates their strikes," Salai said, pointing to a cluster of lines. "We hit this, we weaken them. But it's well protected," said one of the younger fighters. "Getting close won't be easy." "We don't need everyone inside," Kaelin said. "A small team can go in. The rest create a diversion." The plan was dangerous, almost foolish, but it was the only choice they had. Without action, they would be picked off one by one. "I'll lead the diversion," Naira said suddenly, her voice cutting through the room. Heads turned. Salai's eyes narrowed. "You're still recovering." "That's why I must lead it," Naira said. "I need to show them I'm not the queen they remember. I will fight beside them." "No," Kaelin said, standing. "You're not ready. If you die, the last thread holding this group together snaps." Her eyes met his, sharp with defiance. "I won't be caged." Kalen didn't back down. I'm not caging you. I'm keeping you alive. There's a difference. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Nira looked away. Fine. But I choose who joins the team. I won't let them go in blind. Kalen gave a single nod. In the hours that followed, preparations began. Weapons were cleaned, armor patched, routes memorized. Nira walked among the group, speaking softly to her people, not giving orders, just listening. For the first time in her life, she wasn't above them. She was one of them. Some looked at her with doubt, others with curiosity, a few with something close to hope. Kalen worked with the infiltration team, selecting members who had the right mix of skill and courage. He chose a quiet alien scout named Jarrell, a sharp-eyed engineer called Mara, and 2 more warriors who had proven themselves in earlier fights. Nira watched from a distance as he led them through drills, teaching them signals, escape routes, silent movement. That night, the bunker grew quiet. A fire flickered in the center of the room, and for the first time, stories were shared. Not orders or warnings, just voices telling pieces of themselves. One soldier spoke of his lost sister, another remembered his home before the war. Even Kalen spoke, his voice rough as he spoke of a friend who had died saving his life. Nira listened. Then, after a pause, she spoke too. I was called the Flame Bearer, she said. People followed me because they feared the fire. But fear doesn't last, I see that now. She looked around the circle, no one interrupted. I don't want to lead with fear anymore. If I fight beside you, it's because I choose to. If you fight beside me, I hope it's because you choose that too. The fire cracked. And for a moment, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not trust. But maybe the start of something that could become both. When dawn broke, the camp was quiet, but no longer lifeless. People moved with purpose. Nira stood near the entrance, her armor repaired as best as possible. Kalen joined her, his pack ready. Still time to change your mind, he said with a faint smile. She shook her head. This is the first thing I've been sure of in a long time. He nodded. Then let's go. Together they stepped into the light, the path ahead uncertain. The ashes of a broken crown still clung to Nira's shoulders. But now, she walked forward not to hold on to what she'd lost, but to find what could still be saved. The sky was just beginning to change as the 2 teams parted ways, one heading toward the enemy's fortress, the other preparing for the fight that would draw fire away from it. The clouds above were streaked with soft pinks and faded orange, the kind of light that made the world look quiet, even when it was on the edge of war. Kalen adjusted the straps on his pack as he led the infiltration team into the shadows of the forest. Every step forward took them closer to the Harrow fortress and farther from safety. Behind them, Nira stood at the head of the diversion force, her face calm, though her chest held the weight of everything still unspoken. Inside the fortress, the enemy was already stirring. Machines hummed under the floors, walls pulsed with strange lights, and guards began their early shifts. The fortress wasn't just a building, it was alive, buzzing with movement and cold purpose. It stood like a wound in the land, tall and sharp, with smooth black walls that refused to show weakness. It was the heart of everything that had torn their worlds apart. Kalen and his team moved like ghosts through the outer defenses. Jorel led the way, his senses sharp, guiding them around motion sensors and quiet drones. Mara hacked into small control panels, disabling alarms without leaving a trace. Every moment felt like a gamble. One wrong step, one misplaced breath, and everything could fall apart. At the same time, Nira's voice rang out over the hills as her team launched their attack. Blasts echoed in the distance. Lights lit up the valley. Smoke began to rise. The enemy's focus turned, just as planned. She moved through the chaos with a kind of grace she hadn't felt in years, not since before the crown had made her something distant. Her soldiers didn't fight because they feared her. They fought beside her, and that made every step more powerful. Inside the fortress, Kalen reached the core chamber. It was massive. Glowing cables twisting along the ceiling, machines humming, like low thunder. A door blocked the control center, sealed tight with strange locks. While Mara worked to break the security, Kalen watched the hallway behind them. He felt the tension building, a storm just waiting to break. Then came footsteps, heavy, fast. Not one, many. "They're coming," Jarrell warned. Mara kept working, her fingers flying. "I need more time." Kalen made a decision. "I'll hold them. Just finish the job." He stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, weapon ready. The enemy rounded the corner, tall, armored figures with glowing visors. He didn't run. He fired, not to kill, but to slow them down. His goal wasn't victory, it was time. Behind him, the door clicked open. The team rushed in. Mara found the main console and began uploading the virus that would shut down the entire power system. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. The walls trembled. Outside, Naira saw the change immediately. The enemy's fire lost precision. Their machines slowed. She knew Kalen had done it, but she also knew what that meant. She broke from the group, rushing through the smoke and fire. She had to get to him. Her legs burned with the effort. Her side ached, but she didn't stop. Not now. Inside the fortress, Kalen was nearly surrounded. His energy was low, hands shaking. He had fought too long, pushed too hard. Then the hallway behind him lit up and Naira burst through. Her eyes found his. There was no time for words, only action. She raised her staff, its edge glowing, and with swift, precise strikes, she drove the enemy back. Together, they fought, side by side, not as human and alien, not as soldier and queen, but as two people who refused to give up. When the last guard fell, they stood in the silence, breathing hard. The power core behind them now pulsed weakly, systems shutting down. "One by one, it's done," Kalen said, his voice low. She nodded. "Let's get out." They didn't speak as they moved back through the fortress. Explosions rocked the walls. Their people were already pulling back, retreating from the diversion, their job complete. The two groups met again at the edge of the forest, weary but alive. The fortress burned behind them, a black tower collapsing into itself. The war wasn't over, not yet, but something important had changed. The tide had shifted. Back at the shelter, the people gathered. For once, they weren't just preparing for another attack, they were planning for a future. Naira stood before them, not as the flame bearer, not as a ruler, but as a survivor. She spoke of rebuilding, of learning from mistakes, of trust. Some nodded. Some still watched her with guarded eyes, but no one turned away. Later, as the stars came out, she and Kalen sat at the edge of the hill looking up. "You still think we're too different?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I think we're different in the right ways." She smiled softly. "You changed everything, you..." "No. No," he said, watching the sky. "We did." Far above them, the stars blinked like slow, distant promises. Somewhere out there, more battles waited, more choices. But for now, they had won something greater than a fight. They had found each other in the ashes and built a spark that could one day light a better world. Where dawn once feared to rise, it now burned gently in their hands.